Welcome to the Trailblazers. I am your host, Perry Rarick. The purpose of the Trailblazers is to share with you interesting and thought-provoking discussions I have with trailblazing business leaders. They're innovative. They're experts at what they do. They offer unique solutions to some of the most challenging issues that businesses face, and they're not afraid to challenge the status quo occasionally. My Trailblazer guest today is Eric Lee. He is the general manager of Boreal Biomanufacturing. They are formerly known as Ottawa Hospital's Biotherapeutics Manufacturing Center, or BMC, and that's one of Canada's leading advanced therapies clinical manufacturing centers. Eric is a pharmaceutical industry executive with deep experience in biomanufacturing and commercial leadership that includes GMP-regulated experience across R&D, program management, and business development. He served a pivotal role scaling Novacol Pharma's CDMO business from startup all the way to commercial success. He also led the negotiation of a long-term fill-finish agreement with Moderna for Canadian-made mRNA vaccines and helped secure a major site expansion in partnership with the Government of Canada. He's a graduate of the Admare Academy Executive Institute, and he's passionate advocate for Canada's biomanufacturing ecosystem. Eric, it is an honor to have you. Welcome to the Trailblazers.
Thank you, Perry. It's a pleasure to be here today and to speak with you.
Cell and gene therapy development is evolving at a pace that far exceeds even optimistic forecasts from 5 years ago. New clinical breakthroughs and manufacturing innovations are emerging quickly in a field that's already characterized by scientific acceleration, and it's awfully difficult for a contract development and manufacturing organization to effectively communicate their capabilities in this space, let alone establish a new brand in this space. So enter Boreal Biomanufacturing. Today, Eric is going to share his and Boreal's story, the challenges they faced, and the strategy they used to develop their new brand. So, Eric, thank you again for being with us. And I want to start with just having you tell us a little bit about Boreal. What is Boreal's roots? What are your capabilities? And most importantly, what stage of drug development do you serve?
Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction, Perry. Well, Boreal Biomanufacturing is a not-for-profit cancer and complex disease focused cell and gene therapy CDMO built to get never been done before advanced therapies from proof of concept through to clinical trials. We're part of the Ottawa Hospital, which is a leading Canadian clinical research center that operates nearly 800 active clinical trials at any given time. And to give you an understanding of the size and impact of that, clinical breadth and expertise, in Canada, there are about 3,000 active clinical trials at any given time. So nearly a third of Canada's clinical trials operate out of our research center. As you shared during the intro, we were previously known as the Ottawa Hospital's Biotherapeutics Manufacturing Center, which is a bit of a mouthful, or BMC for short. And our group has really been a leading Canadian center of excellence for advanced therapies manufacturing over the past 2 decades. They built up an outstanding track record, having manufactured, I believe, over 300 batches, supported over 20 phase 1 to 3 clinical trials around the world. We've supported pioneering of modern oncolytic viral therapy. We've supported leading regenerative medicine therapies for indications such as pulmonary arterial hypertension, bronchopulmonary dysplasia, and we also helped to co-develop the first made in Canada CAR T product. So a tremendous track record and breadth of experience from the group. The actual manufacturing capabilities are focused on viral vectors, which include oncolytic viruses, gene therapy vectors, and vaccines, as well as cell therapies, including both autologous and allogenic cell products. But I really want to hammer home that we are laser focused on cancer and complex rare disease indications. We primarily support clinical phase 1 to phase 3 programs. And that's really tied to our roots and identity being born out of a hospital academic center with a focus on bringing innovative discoveries from the lab or the bench to life for first-in-human trials. And what's, I think, really incredible about that is you do see many CDMOs out there say that they support bench-to-bedside activities. But I can say that we truly are bench-to-bedside, where we have that close proximity to the clinicians and the patients, and the products that we manufacture within our group are physically moved, in this case, from upstairs to downstairs to where the patients are being treated. So it's really remarkable to have that true bench to bedside application.
That's incredible. I didn't realize you had that many trials going on at any given moment. That's huge. I'm so glad we're getting some exposure into that a little bit. Tell me, so this phase 1 to 2, phase 1 to 3 space, these stages of drug development, especially for cell and gene therapy, are very critical to have the right partnerships, and they really pose some unique challenges. Can you talk a little bit about that and why Boreal, why all of you are ideally suited to help folks when they're at those stages of development?
Yeah, of course. Great question, Perry. I think we got to look at it perhaps at a macro level first. And one of the largest, chasms or gaps in the therapeutic development journey is the translation of basic scientific discoveries into first in human trials. And this is often coined as the translational gap. But I think a better term for that is it's a valley of death. And, there's various statistics, but and depending on, the product, the indication, the backing, but anywhere between 10 to 25%, I think, of preclinical assets will never make it into phase 1. So having been born out of an academic institute, we've seen firsthand the potential of these basic scientific discoveries. And we have an obligation to do our part to help to catalyze that leap over this translational valley of death by providing our clients with a proven path to success. So as I mentioned, over the past 2 decades, this is what we've done. We've helped to take these discoveries and we've gone through the hurdles, whether it may be regulatory, scientific, process development, tech transfer, to increase the odds of success of these discoveries making it into humans for the first time.
And you referred to it as the Valley of Death. This is where great innovations die. But there's a gap that you talked about when we previously spoke, this gap between concept and first in human, that you've really, you reset that playing field. Your clinicians are, I think when you described it, are literally going from the lab to the patient. Can you talk a little bit about how that happens in your facility?
Yeah, how that happens really, I think it's bringing a platform approach to product development, because one of your questions that you mentioned earlier was the funding structures that ties to these innovators and these programs. At least in Canada, there are incredible, well-established funding mechanisms for the basic sciences. And then there are also funding mechanisms that exist for clinical trials themselves. But where that gap exists is that there's no clear funding mechanism for that translation piece. And funding is often a reason for that, death of programs. And as we know in the marketplace, whether it's pharma partnerships or venture capital investments, oftentimes they tend to favor investments into later phase assets that have that first in human data generated. So it really is a challenging place to be. So as a part of our desire to help, we're not a funding body, but as a partner and manufacturer, we focus on leveraging platforms that we've developed to make it easier for these innovators to bring their assets so that we can plug it into an established platform and not have to start from scratch, not have to develop a process from concept through to GMP scalability, whereas we're able to leverage a pre-existing parameters and optimized processes. And of course, they often do need to be tweaked on a product or asset by asset basis, but you're starting from a position of much higher success and you're much further along in that tech transfer / translation journey.
Yeah, it's amazing. This space is innovative, but now you're delivering innovations within this innovative space. It's really amazing to hear about. Can you talk about that a little further and like offering an example of how this has happened in your facility?
Yeah, how this has happened in our facility has really been organic and has been tied to the needs of the scientists. Going back to our story and history, we were born out of the need to support local innovators with their pioneering oncolytic viruses, which are cancer fighting viruses. And 20 years ago, this was an incredibly new field. And our facility was born to support the delivery of these products because there was no capabilities outside that existed to support them. So learning together, we went through these challenges of bringing a product to patients, undergoing the regulatory challenges of going through clinical trial applications, and scrapping together to find funding to build the manufacturing platforms that are necessary to generate a GMP compliant product. And over time, that's really just developed and evolved. So a great example is that these oncolytic viruses are what are known as replicating viruses. And a lot of viruses that you see in gene therapies today are actually non-replicating. So replicating viruses, because they can replicate, they require a much higher and stringent level of safety. And so because we've actually started with a product that's requires more stringent controls, we're set up for anything that is lesser, for example. So we've been able to easily transition to other viral therapies without having to adapt or change our facilities and to leverage these workflows and to grow off of them. Another great example is that these oncolytic viruses, they're actually dosed at a very, very high titer compared to other traditional therapies. So with that, a single batch, you're often focused on treating a small population of patients because, again, we're targeting unique cancers. However, that concept can easily be adapted for a much larger and broader approach. For example, a viral therapy that requires lower dosing, such as a vaccine for an infectious disease. Well, we can do that, and that, let's say tens of hundreds of doses that we were able to make for cancers can now become thousands of doses because they're dosed at a much lower range for an infectious disease. So I think starting with these niche, unique assets that have these tight requirements have really allowed us to grow and evolve to support the needs of science that's continue to quickly evolve.
Amazing. I want to transition a bit. Got all of this great innovation taking place in one location, but people need to know about it. So I want to transition into the commercial side of what you're doing, something you have a great expertise in. So I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about that. You started, so before Boreal existed, you were BMC, and that's a mouthful, so I'm just going to reduce it to BMC. It was a hospital system, and you recognized that this deserved a brand separate of BMC. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. Why was the brand needed? When did it first occur to you that, you know what, we need a brand name? And I should also mention, it's a pretty cool name, Boreal. If people are thinking of the boreal or boreal forest or the aurora borealis, they're not too far from the origins of that name. So can you tell us that story?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess in terms of the name itself, of course, it's a tie and a metaphor to the boreal forest, which being in Canada, I believe the boreal forest covers about 60% of our land mass. So it really is tied to our identity. And why the name boreal specifically? Well, as I mentioned, it's a metaphor. So life in the boreal forest is acutely adaptable, remarkable. It's individual, but it's also really interconnected. So as an organization, we take our inspiration from this example, drawing on our diverse and growing compendium of knowledge, experience, capabilities, our network of people, our interconnectedness with the clinicians and patients. And we really see ourselves as a symbiotic network that sustains and shepherds life. And in our case, we aimed, like the forest, to bring these new therapies to life.
Yeah. And when did you, I love the name, by the way, and I love the story, the tenuous nature of what's going on in that forest and how things survive. Just amazing. It's hard. It's hard to live there.
It is. It is hard.
When did you realize that you could have just been continuing on as BMC, right? But you needed this separate brand. What was going on in the market space and in your mind that was the trigger to launch this brand?
Yeah, and this ties to really what attracted me to this role, having joined the organization less than a year ago. So what attracted me to this role was that at the time, Boreal or BMC as it was before, was in a phase of huge transition with tremendous growth opportunity. They had just been awarded, I believe it was about $78 million in federal and provincial grant supports to expand our facilities and to really position ourselves as a national center of excellence for advanced therapies manufacturing. And luckily, from a professional standpoint, I love developing and executing business strategies, and that ties to my commercial background. So when this opportunity came up, it really seemed like a perfect fit. So having come from a similar but adjacent industry, at Novacol, it was a fill finish organization. I really wanted to bring the commercial mindset and approach that have helped me to succeed in the past, but I wanted to apply it to our environment. So coming in, I really wanted to understand the environment, both internally, which includes learning about our track record, understanding what makes us special, what makes us different, what we do well, and what we probably shouldn't be doing, to be honest. And then also understanding the external dynamics. So what's happening in the market? What's the competitive landscape? How is the therapeutic pipeline progressing? What are technology trends? And putting all that together to build an informed story that would drive our strategy forward. And it's really interesting because, of course, when I joined, the cell gene therapy landscape was actually not looking too rosy, right? We had talked about probably, during COVID or post-COVID boom of optimism in terms of, in terms of the commercial pipeline for gel, cell, and gene therapy assets. But the reality today is that the commercial pipeline is not where we thought it would be. And we've seen quite a bit of consolidation and change within the marketplace. So, anyways, using that information, we built out a strategy, and a major outcome from this exercise was that a separate brand was needed to meet our future growth goals. And being tied to a leading clinical research center is tremendous. As I mentioned, that interconnectedness, close ties to researchers, clinicians, and patients. However, the reality is that it can also be confusing from a branding perspective because hospitals are primarily associated with primary care. And the nature of CDMO business is that it is, B2B, business to business. So you do need to be a little bit laser focused in terms of your messaging, and how you're positioning yourself. And I thought it was really a disservice to the experience and the work that our team has put in if they did not have a standalone brand to stand behind.
Yeah, great story. That's very interesting. Now, you applied a strategy that's it's not unknown. There are some large companies that have used this strategy. Its origins are with a gentleman named Roger Martin. But I'd like you to talk a little bit, expose our audience to the understanding this strategy. It's different. It's a different approach. It's not very common. It's unlikely many of them have used it, let alone came in contact with it, let alone used it or applied it. So can you tell us a little bit about this strategy and how you applied it?
Of course. Yeah. And as I mentioned, as part of building this strategy, leveraging my experience, I was trained in utilizing Roger Martin's Playing to Win framework. And for those who aren't aware, Roger Martin is a famous business mind and professor coming out of the University of Toronto. And he's published quite a few books, but one of them is called the Playing to Win. And his framework surrounds 5 central questions, which are: what is our winning aspiration? Where will we play? How will we win? What capabilities must be in place? And what management systems are required? And what I really love about this approach is that it's incredibly data driven. So as I mentioned, as part of that data gathering exercise, whether it was the internal capabilities, the external market dynamics, understanding the pipeline, all of that fed into these questions to try to answer and to deliver a cohesive strategy. So, and I think a lot of folks oftentimes mistake what it takes to win in the marketplace versus what it takes to play. So that's where this exercise was incredibly valuable. Folks often would say, well, if you have this type of track record, that's your winning formula. And I would argue, well, actually having competence and having physical capabilities is actually your right to play. But there's something else that it takes in order to win. And that's what we underwent as part of this exercise. And part of that was, of course, having that brand identity. And of course, I think another part of it is also focus on understanding our value proposition to the market, because there are a lot of CDMOs out there. There are a lot of folks that are trying to do everything for everyone, but I really believe in being laser focused. That's why we're really focused on that clinical phase delivery, as well as being indication focused, because if you do not have that familiarity with these types of programs, if you don't understand what the needs are of both the customers and the patients that are going to be receiving these products, you are at a disadvantage.
So well stated. There are so many CDMOs that try to be everything to everybody. I really respect what you're doing and what you did. Can you talk a little bit about, okay, you described it as an exercise. You went through this exercise. Who was part of the exercise? How did you build a team that went through that exercise, and how long did it take?
Yeah, this exercise took about, what was it? It was about, I think, eight months in total, starting from my arrival. And it first started off as a bit of I started off as a solo, let's say, management consultant, where I came in and, like I talked about, performed this analysis internally and externally. And then we started to also bring on other SMEs to help, whether it was, my own scientific staff, my directors, such as our director of scientific ops and business ops, our quality team members. But I think importantly, we also consulted with several external stakeholders to understand the voice of the customer, their views on the market landscape, and their views of interacting with us. So we worked with a few, CEOs of adjacent technology companies. We worked with CMC consultants who run consulting businesses, who see a lot of CDMOs and interact with a lot of folks like us. And then, of course, we brought in a marketing agency. So the agency that we work with, they're called Inventive. And we really focus on folks that really understand the industry and have a breadth of expertise, because I don't believe that working with generalists in our field work for this specific scenario. And I really want folks who understand the nuances of a B2B business within the cell and gene therapy landscape.
That's an interesting point you make, that generalists, it's hard to apply a generalist framework to this. So the relationship with your agency, fairly customized?
Correct. Yeah, we went through a full process with them, from a discovery phase, which included their involvement in that understanding of, our goals. They were tied into that play to win strategy session. And then they also supported, interviewing both our stakeholders internally, interviewing folks within the hospital who've interacted with us, and then interviewing the external stakeholders as well to synthesize, what that, I think, visual identity would look like. We had already settled on name, so there was no negotiating over that, but we had to build a visual identity as well as a written identity that I think was extremely cohesive and tied really nicely to the origins and the story, that are true to what we are, but also speak to our aspirations.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. There are so many partnerships. They call themselves partnerships, but you're really drawn into some kind of formula that is, you've outsourced to an agency. It's their formula. You're drawn in. You're going to do that. So I really appreciate this relationship that you just described. So you talked a lot. So you've talked throughout the focus, the laser focus in the early stage development, why that's important, why your capabilities align with that. At a high level, how did that translate to the message, the value proposition, and then the messaging that grew out of that? What were the master themes and messages that came out of that?
Yeah, we talked about this briefly, in that you can't be everything for everyone, right? So when you set out your values, you do have to understand, what we are, what we are not, and what value does that bring to our potential customers. So in terms of, our brand pillars that are tied to this identity, I think at a high level, the overarching message is that we are a catalyst to bring these therapies to life. And that's that metaphor to the Boreal forest. And that's the identity. But then within that, you have the sub pillars. One being that, we are, I think, nimbleness is one of our key values and pillars, because we're friendly, we're flexible, and we're adaptable. And these are things that you do need in an early stage program, where you're still trying to work out whether it's, your product candidate or your indication or your manufacturing strategy, whatever it may be. But we are extremely, strong at pivoting. And, you mentioned my past life. I worked with an organization such as Moderna, and something that I really respect from them is one of their mindsets, and it's always resonated to me, is that they constantly pivot in the face of new data. And I really resonate with that, because I think, especially when you're in such an innovative space, you do need to constantly pivot when new information is presented to you. But what does that mean? I guess on the flip side is that, unlike, much larger CDMOs, they would be more focused on, being a little bit more rigid and being a little bit more robust, and focus on delivering large volumes and large programs for late stage. So there is a bit of a contrast there in terms of fit. So what does that mean? you're going to get a team that has expertise in, doing a lot of different things, but applying it to a proven platform, as I shared with you. And our history has shown that we've been able to do that. The next value is that, we truly are connected, as I shared with you, that, that network of being, part of the force, and how we're so closely connected with stakeholders, partners, clinicians, patients. Again, unlike a freestanding, unaffiliated, standalone CDMO, we really do have that close relationship and can pull resources that may not necessarily be, 100%, manufacturing, but if there's a clinical element that ties to, for example, your module 1 of your clinical package, right? Typically, your CMC package is module 2 and 3, but the reality is that they do talk to each other. So we have that ability to pull in our clinical colleagues who do this every day. And then I think that the last value is that, we see that we're brain powered, and that we're insightful, we're clever, and that we're always, in building up on our depth of knowledge, as I shared with you, taking the original idea and evolving it to be able to support multiple programs in the future. And I think that's where we may be a little bit different from other, academic CDMOs, because we have taken these products to market, and we play really nicely on both ends of, the academic and industry spectrum, having support academics, but also, seen them spin out into companies and then become, multi-million-dollar market cap companies. So we've really seen that full spectrum, and it's been proven through the case studies that I shared with you in terms of, the programs that we've helped to pioneer and bring to light for the first time. So I'd say those are the essence of really what we are.
Yeah. Several times you brought up it's important to understand what not to do or what we cannot do. That's hard, especially, there's a philosophy oftentimes when you're growing that, well, we want to try some things that are just out of reach because we'll be able to develop that capability. How do you manage that? How do you manage it yourself? And then how do you communicate that in the organization to kind of rein those folks in that want to keep venturing out into the frontier?
Yeah, I think it's a balance, right? Is it a strategic endeavor to try to do something different that you think you can win at, or are you chasing a shiny object?
Nicely put. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very easy to say, oh, there's a new modality or new product that's emerging, and the CAGR numbers look awesome. Why are we not getting involved in that? And then that's really where it dials back into that play to win framework, and you start to ask the question to yourself, well, what does it take to do this well? What does it take to win at this? And then you really start to see, oh, well, there's going to be huge investments, whether it's in technologies, into knowledge, human capacity, into systems, or, oh, this is going to create conflicts with our existing programs, which keep the lights on today. So I think when you go through that type of exercise, then you really start to understand whether it's a fit or not. And yes, you do need to be bold and ambitious, but I think if you go through this exercise, then you'll see, okay, wow, getting into, I think, for example, modified cell therapies like CAR T, that's a great fit for our team because, well, we've already shown excellence in both viral vectors, which you need for the lentivirus, but we also have a cell therapy program that can support the modified cell therapy work. So that's a really nice marriage there. It's synergistic. It builds off existing competency. So that to me is a no-brainer. But if you were to say, well, let's get into, doing monoclonal antibodies, well, that's a complete different workflow. You're introducing reagents, chemicals that may not jive with our current facilities. So I think you just have to position it in that way and bring that strategic mindset and assessment. And that really allows you to hopefully make an informed decision.
Yeah, very interesting. So you're not too far into this adventure, rolling out your brand, introducing it. How's everything going? What kind of feedback you getting from customers and prospects and other people in this space?
Yeah, we launched the new brand back in June, right before Bio, and I'd say the feedback has been incredible. We've got great traction in terms of the pickup of the launch, and I've heard from folks who I didn't even know were aware of this rebrand. So I think it's doing its job, but at the same time, this is just the start. We put in a lot of effort and work into the rebrand, but now it's about propagating the brand, continuing to build that market visibility, showing that we are here to play, we're here to win, and that I think importantly we're here to last as well because of what you've seen in the market. That's a fear, but again, because we're not a new pop-up, we're built on 2 decades of experience. We've got solid track record, solid backing, and we've got a really strong growth trajectory.
Yeah. Well, great stuff. Thank you very much for joining us today. My guest, and best wishes to you and the team at Boreal. Very interesting. I really hope for your maybe not hope. I'm looking forward to your great success. So my guest today has been Eric Lee. He is the general manager of Boreal Biomanufacturing located in Ottawa, Canada. Very interesting model in the cell and gene space. Eric, how can our guests get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can find us on LinkedIn, which is through Boreal Biomanufacturing. We also have a website, boreal-bio.com, or they can reach me personally on my email, which is eric@boreal-bio.com. All
right, excellent. Eric, thanks again for being with us today. You are a true trailblazer.
Thank you, Perry. It's been great.